Well, Jack, welcome. It is so great to have you, man. I know you're running at a pretty fast pace right now, right?
It feels like a full-on sprint each and every day from the second I wake up until the second I finally go to bed. And then sometimes I can't even go to bed because my mind is still going.
I'll
So
bet.
I need to get better at shutting things down and being able to take a breath. But
Yeah.
yeah, things are moving along at a pretty quick pace right now.
So I love that, and you and I talked about that a little bit before the show. I love that for you. I love watching your success, and I am so loving your books. I've already loaned out your first one, but here's True Believer, and I am such a fan because that bookcase behind me has about 1,000 books in it, and I know you're a book guy as well. But most of
Yeah.
my stuff is like business, personal development, personal improvement. And so what I'll do then is when I'm on a vacation or when I need a break, I read something like what you write. And I had read all of Vince Flynn's books, and I told you I met him at a book signing years ago before his untimely death. And man, it feels to me like you stepped right into that genre and have beautifully filled his place. So for anybody who's not read your book, first of all, I want to make sure that I describe the genre correct. I'm not familiar enough. I probably would have said geopolitical thriller, but
Close, yeah. Political thriller is typically what people
okay.
say. Thriller is more broad, and
Yeah.
then political thriller is kind of narrows it down a
Yeah.
little bit. And of course, Vince Flynn was the master and really redefined the political thriller for a new generation
Totally.
with Charles Mitts, and then
Totally.
after that with his Mitch Rapp character. So, and I got to
Absolutely.
meet him as well. I got to meet him at SHOT Show
Oh,
actually
right
I think
on.
it was 2009, and I got to meet him there. And then it was at the end of the show, so we got to walk out together. And for
Very
people that
cool.
SHOT Show, when you walk out, it's quite the trek when everyone's leaving at the same time.
I'll
So we got
bet.
to spend, I mean, solid 30 minutes, 45 minutes together, and
So cool.
it was just a great memory.
So cool. Well, we certainly mourn his loss, but man, today I celebrate what you're doing, and I want to reverse engineer this a little bit. As I told you, the name of the show is All In with Coach Bill Hart, and it's because when I wrote my book White Collar Warrior, I found myself signing on the title page, as they tell you to do, right? Like who knew?
Exactly.
I didn't know that.
I
Anyway,
didn't.
right? Um, they yeah. So anyway, they tell you to do that, and I found myself signing, if you're going to be in, be all in, and then I would underline it, and then it just hit me one day that if there was a podcast that talked about just this principle of being all in every different walk of life that you can imagine, like I would listen to that. And so that's where the show came from. And I've interviewed everybody from Bob Goff to a guy with one leg that has climbed all of North America's peaks in record time over able-bodied men. Lost his leg as a teenager in a horrible water skiing accident. You don't even want to think about it.
Oh,
But and everything in between, right? And so I've had former military guys, and I've had a woman who kills it in the beauty space, like direct
wow.
marketing, beauty space. So, and everything in between. And so it hit me the other day, actually, when I was interviewing Fred Burton. That's when this all came up, is that you had been on his show, I think,
Yep.
and I had been on his show, and it just hit me as it normally does, like, oh my goodness, Jack would be phenomenal for this, because in my book, so I never served in the military, full disclosure, but I do serve the men and women that have served us through my work through boot campaign, and I've just got a little bit more awareness probably than your typical 99% civilian that never walked that path. And it hit me one day that, man, I've interviewed Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, and a Top Gun instructor for my book. I would love to interview Jack, because he's transitioned into such a different world. So not your boys at Forged, right, with
There
T-shirts,
you go. That,
not Jocko with Echelon Front and all that's going on there. You've moved off into a completely different realm that, to my knowledge, nobody else, at least in your contemporary space, is in. Is that not accurate?
right, and it's something I wanted to do from a very early age. Both serve my country in uniform as a SEAL, and then make that transition and write thrillers. And that's because growing up in the 80s, a lot of the protagonists from the thrillers I was reading had backgrounds I wanted one day. Typically, they had backgrounds as like CAA, special activities guys, and they all had Vietnam experience in the 80s.
Right.
They had that. There were special forces guys in Vietnam. There were SEALs in Vietnam, that sort of thing. John Clark from the Clancy novels, of course, and all the protagonists from guys like Nelson DeMille, David Morrell, A.J. Quinnell, J.C. Pollock, all these guys that wrote these thrillers that I was just loved growing up, had their background. So I was going to do it one day. So I didn't have to search too hard as I was leaving the military for what I was going to do next. I already knew, and I had some backup plans because it's good to have contingency plans. But at the same time, I knew what I was going to do, and I did it.
So I love that you post on that from time to time, and I want to make sure that people go hang out with you on Instagram, because you do a great job of calling out many of those authors and protagonists that you just listed. And I love that you have a reverence for that, and it's so wide scope that I mean, you go everywhere, man. I've seen you talking about people that I've never heard of, and I love that in you, that it's inside you. So let's get to the all-in thing. So it starts with you. I think you said you grew up in Northern California, right?
Yeah.
And then
my
but
mom
at some point,
so that helped out too. Like we grew up with a love of reading.
Nice.
At an early age, so we were surrounded by books at all times, as I am right now. Now, for those that are watching on YouTube, you can see the books in the background.
So cool.
And that's just a small number of them. The other ones are books. Some of these go 3 deep because they're very deep bookshelves.
Oh, my goodness.
We need to move soon so I can have a bigger library.
I was going to say, I think it's official. You have a problem. It's a good problem, but it's a problem.
Lugging these things around like Churchill on campaign for 20 years. My wife wishes I could just switch over to a Kindle or something, but I miss that.
It's not the same, man.
All day on the devices, I can't also read and relax on a device as well.
Totally. Got to lick the finger and flip the page. Come on, man. Got to be able to write in them.
Experience for me. Although people love the audiobooks, and I think the Instagram audience, podcast audience are the same people that like that. And this is based on nothing scientific. Also like the audiobooks, and it's the fastest growing segment of publishing. And I didn't know anything really about it, and just chose an amazing narrator because Simon & Schuster called me one afternoon and said, "Hey, who do you want to do this?" And I said, "I don't know." And they said, "Can you let us know by the end of business?" And looking at my watch, it's like noon here, so it's, it's almost the end of business in New York. So I figured out this Ray Porter, just listened to some of his stuff, and he was amazing. And he brought a whole other audience too. I didn't realize that people will follow a narrator from book to book.
Nor did I. Wow.
An author follow that narrator, and he brought a whole audience to the audio space in this particular case. And he's an amazing guy. I was up for audiobook of the year last year, so it's up. We were in New York and had our tuxes on and everything, and it was up there next to Stephen King and Ruth Ware, and it was Ruth Ware won, but to see it next to Stephen King up there,
was my goodness,
completely surreal,
right? Wow, I had no idea that they had their own followers either, but that's a great tip to me. I enjoy reading the book so much. I'll do that for the efficiency on business books, but maybe I need to go on that journey as well with book 3.
Yeah, totally different experience. And I, for me, I find myself, podcasts are different because even though it's us talking, there's a third person in this conversation, and that's the person that's listening in their car.
Totally.
But that third person could be 5 million people, but they all think they're the third person in the conversation because it's engaging. They're engaged in that. Whereas for me anyway, when I listen to an audiobook, I tend to think of other things. I find myself listening and then thinking about other things, and then, oh wait, where was I? Did I miss something?
Sure.
But for a book, when I'm in a book, I'm all in. There's nothing that distracts me when I'm reading. And I think it's just probably the way I grew up and the way I process information.
So thanks for the segue, because you just used the expression. So there you were as a kid, all in your books, right? And then at some point you decided, I know your grandfather served, right? And that had an influence on you. But at some point you said, I got to join the Navy, or was it always, I want to be a SEAL?
Always, I want to be a SEAL. Up until age 7. So I had 7 years to figure it out. And I knew I was going in the military. in some way, shape, or form, because my grandfather was killed in World War II. He was a Corsair pilot, was killed on an aircraft carrier off Okinawa in 1945 when kamikaze hit it. But I grew up with pictures of his squadron, black and white photos, his old medals and his wings and that sort of thing. So, and also Black Sheep Squadron was on TV.
Yes, absolutely.
And in the early 80s, it was in reruns. For
Right.
those who don't know what that is, it's a TV show based on Greg Boynton's life,
Right.
Pappy Boynton. And he was kind of a larger than life guy. And Robert Conrad played Pappy Boynton back then. And I love watching those with my dad, because I think that was his connection to his dad as well, because he never knew him. Obviously,
Right.
He was born and while his father was away in World War II, and he never came home. So watching that show was kind of, with me, was kind of a connection to his dad.
So cool. It's such a great show, by the way.
Yeah,
such a great show.
I think a lot of my leadership style came from that show. It's such a watching that show at such an early age, you know. And I just those guys were always fighting and drinking, and then they had one of the best records as far as air-to-air combat in World War II. So
no doubt,
it definitely had an influence on me. But it was around that same time is when I found out what SEALs were.
Yeah.
And that's when my mom took me down to the local library. We did a little research, and the takeaway from that research in the early 80s was that the training was the toughest ever devised by a modern military. Whether that's true or not, that's what I read at age 7. And that they were one of the most elite fighting forces in the world. So that's all I needed to hear. And ever since then, I was just focused on one day becoming a SEAL, one day testing myself in that crucible that was BUDS. And so I always read books, whether they were fiction or non, that had something to do with the military, something to do with special operations, something to do with warfare, something that would prepare me for what I eventually was planning to do with my life. So I think I was just wired that way from an early age. And
so interesting.
Don't know another way to really do anything.
So you must, with the increased visibility and notoriety, you must have young men coming to you saying, Jack, I really want to be a SEAL. Like, what advice do you have for me? What should I do to prepare for BUDS? Is that not true? Doesn't this happen?
It does. It does. Happens a lot. And I'm always happy to talk to people. And it's tough, because now there's so much information. I think you can just, if you were to Google Hell Week, I am sure the Hell Week schedule would pop up somewhere out there near the top of that search. I haven't done it. I would suspect that's the case. And it does shift a little bit, you know, but for all intents and purposes, it's similar. Like, you will experience something similar to the schedule that I'm sure pops up online now. So I didn't have that, obviously. Nobody had that until recently. And I don't know if that helps or hurts. In that, you know, I prepared as much as I possibly could. And if I was going in today, knowing I would probably do that, thinking that it would help prepare me. But on the outside looking back, I don't know if it really does. Now, for me, growing up in the 80s and then the 90s, you know, there was more and more coming out as I edged towards going into the Navy in 1996. But it was manageable. You could actually read it all. But as soon as the advent of the internet and then the notoriety that SEALs have attained over the last 20 years at war, you can't possibly sift through all that information. There is so much from how to work out, how to eat, how to prepare yourself mentally, what to expect when you get there. Most of us going in, I was probably the most prepared of anybody that I know. I knew, but there's still you didn't know that much. You knew it was going to be hard.
Sure.
So all of that, all that research that I did, all that it really prepared me for was, hey, this is the toughest training you can possibly go through.
Right.
And people are not going to make it, and the number is 80% are not going to make it. And for me, that's all that was a draw. And that's all the thought I gave to that percentage was, I'll be in the 20%. And that's it. Everything else, all other bandwidth was focused on preparing myself. And back then it meant like lifting as heavy weight as you could and then running as fast as you could. Like there was no CrossFit.
With boots on in the sand.
There you go. Yeah. With a pack. Like you do that. You've seen some pictures of maybe Rangers doing that or Army Special Forces doing that. So I did put some weight in an old Army pack and wear boots and do that. But, that's about it. There was no, hey, what's your Fran time or hey, percentage of your max? And then what does that even mean? Like there was none of that stuff. So an interesting tidbit there is that how about, 2000, let's say 5 time frame, the Navy decided they needed more SEALs. And really you can't mass produce special operations personnel. That's kind of one of the tenets of special operations is that, no, they can't do that. You have to prepare build up that expertise beforehand, before the conflict ensues.
Right.
Like, we need more SEALs. How do we cut down on this 80% number? And so what they did is invest, I mean, untold millions of dollars into keeping those people that were going to go to BUD/S at boot camp after they finish boot camp, and training them up on how to lift the boats, how to climb the rope, how to do the log PT, talk about resiliency and mental toughness and fortitude, and give them little tips on how to stay focused, and here's how you eat. So we have guys showing up as prepared for BUD/S SEAL training that have ever entered the system before.
Wow.
And what we found is we still have 80% attrition. so we call it bitter
so telling, man.
So it's all about grit, and you can't really, ahead of time, you can't really test somebody for grit unless they've been through some sort of a crucible.
Yeah.
And that crucible
so talk to me about grit. I think that's interesting that you land on that term. It was popularized recently in Angela Duckworth's book, right? But talk to me about your perception of grit. What do you consider that to be?
Well, it's an intangible. So that's why it's so hard for people to describe, because you can't test for it ahead of time with, I mean, they might think people will spend money and pay you to try to tell you here's what you do, here's the attributes. And it might help maybe, but you can also have somebody that fits all those attributes, that tests exactly the way you want, quits the first hour of Hell Week.
Yeah.
So that tells me it's something innate, something that's in us. And you have to be put through some sort of a crucible in order to find if you have it or if you don't. And people may have it at different levels. And some people are forced into situations that they don't volunteer. We volunteer to go to BUD/S. We volunteer for this sort of training. Most of the rest of the world will be thrown into situations where they have to, where they're going to find out if they have it or not. And that's, well, yeah, that's got to be tough.
It's a whole nother story, right? Absolutely.
That's a whole different deal. This is like, we're going to test ourselves in what we think is the toughest crucible out there. And people have been doing that from the beginning of time, especially warriors and hunters in particular.
Totally.
Testing themselves because they know that it's their responsibility to defend the tribe, defend the country, defend their family, and put food on the table. So, testing for grit, that's a tough one to figure out unless you go through some sort of a crucible. Can't do a bullshit.
Yeah. Right. Well, so what's interesting in my world, and with most of the people that would be listening to this podcast, is that they're either in sales or sales leadership. So they're kind of leading edge of the spear in business, right? They got to go make things happen in a civilian environment. And one of the things that I learned from the guys that I interviewed for the book is that, like Andrew Paul told me, I don't know, he's maybe 5'8", something like that. And he said, jokingly, he said, SEALs come in two sizes, small and extra large, right? And so I'm picturing him and then like Marcus and Morgan Luttrell, and okay, yeah, I see that. But the thing that he was telling me is, and I'd just be curious about your thoughts on this, I think it's on the same track, but it was like, we've had like world-class athletes here, incredibly strong guys, incredibly fast guys, but it ultimately comes down to a decision. And I think you said that when you said, okay, 80-20, I'm going to be part of the 20%. That you were prepared physically, but it was the mental decision that you had made that drew you through. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and there's more to it than that. I think it's you make the decision to do it. Yeah, I make the decision to be in the 20%, but so does 100% of the people that walk through that door.
Fair enough.
Until they step foot on that grinder. Until all those the blanks start going off from the automatic weapons on in Hell Week, and they start hosing you down with the fire hoses and yelling. And anyway, you know that you're in for a long week. So it's more than that. And for me, I kind of put it in perspective. When things were tough out there, I put things, because everything's relative. And I put things in their proper perspectives. I was running along that beach, getting yelled at, or I'm on a swim, or I'm doing push-ups, or I have the boat over my head, or the log, or I'm shivering there in the surf zone on the edge of hypothermia, and they're saying, we just need 5 more quitters till we get that. The rest of you can get a bite to eat, or whatever they're doing. Right. Mind games they're playing. I thought, you know what? I'm not storming a beach at Normandy. I'm not coming across a beach at Iwo Jima or something like that, getting gunned down by machine guns from an elevated position. I'm on a beach in Southern California. Yeah, I'm getting yelled at by a big guy with the, the little megaphone thing, and he's in great shape. He's got a blue T-shirt on that says UDT SEAL instructor. But I thought about all the people from the inception of this country up until today that gave me the opportunity to be there on that beach, following my dream into special operations.
Love that.
And for me, that really put things in perspective. And I was like, you know what, I can run another mile here in this soft sand. There's nobody shooting at me. I'm not, going up against the greatest military the world had ever seen when we kicked off the Revolutionary War.
Right.
We kicked off those shackles back then. So you know what, I can do this. I can get yelled at by this guy and do a few more push-ups here. So I tended to think of things like that and put them in their proper perspective.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's a beautiful way to put it, and I appreciate you calling that out. It would have been easy to just sort of agree that, yeah, it's mental, but I love your observation about perspective, that if we can go to that place and say, like you said, this is not, come on, like nobody's shooting at me right now. I mean, I'm sure that happened at some point where now you're in a completely different situation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But as far as the training, I mean, I know there have been some, very sad training deaths, but they're rare. And so it's like your head is saying, you're not going to kill me. Like, I'm going to get through this. So, okay. So now let me put the clutch in and shift, and let's go to, Jack, the author, right? It's like, okay. I mean, I know you're still pretty good with a tomahawk, apparently, and a rifle with a scope.
Yeah, not as good as some. There's some amazing people out there. There's always somebody out there better than you. That's a good lesson as well.
No doubt. But I mean, right? Yeah, good point. But it's not like you traded it in for a pipe and a herringbone jacket with suede elbows. Now you might own one, right? But no. But like you're still a badass, Jack. So you're an outdoorsman. You enjoy that. You like that part of you. But you became an author, and I know what my experience was like, and I can only imagine, because you're dealing with the big leagues. It's a very different track that you went on to than what I did. What I did as a coach is I wrote a book and then shopped, through an agent for a publisher. And after 95 no's, we found a yes, right? And thank God, right? Now we got a book. But for you, with your pedigree and your experience and whatever maybe introductions that made, I have to assume the bar was a bit higher for you. And I have to then assume you probably had a bit similar sort of internal talk of like, really? Am I going to step into this? Or was there never a doubt in your mind that you could deliver the goods on the printed page?
Yeah, no, I never questioned it. And I think it's because I decided at such an early age. And when you decide something at such an early age, it's kind of like, I want to be an astronaut. And people say, oh, that's nice. You'll grow out of it. Right. The same thing when I told people I wanted to be a SEAL. Like, I got that kind of a look, like, oh, yeah. Isn't that sweet? And same thing with an author. And to say you wanted to do both early on to all your family and your friends, and for them to know that you're going to go down that path. For me, it's just, I don't know. I never really thought. I mean, you think about failure in terms of it's important to have backup plans. It's important to have contingency plans. It's important to have some other things that you can fall back on. But at the same time, you got to go all in. I mean, that is 100% what I did, both for the SEAL teams and for writing. And I knew that was my path. And so I never even considered anything else. I thought, okay, I'm in my last year of the military. I've decided to get out. And I decided to get out really when I came back from that last deployment from Iraq, because that was the last time I'd ever tactically lead guys in the field. After that, in the military, so I started enlisted, became an officer, and then I was at that 04. So for the rest of the military, it's a major. For us in the Navy, it's a lieutenant commander. Yep. And nowadays, if you go above that rank, you're kind of a manager. And they talk about you as a leader and all this stuff, but you're a manager. No one wants you in the field with them. You're just a liability if you're going in the field with the guys at this point. You're running around. I recall a character in your book.
I recall a character in the book that comes to mind.
My books are very clear about this. It's not like the old days. It's not like admirals and generals leading from the front, leading from the front of that whether it's the ship or on a horse charging into battle,
Yeah.
those days are long gone.
Yeah.
And anybody who thinks that if any of those people at those ranks are leading you to believe that that is otherwise, yeah, turn around, make new friends.
Understood.
So anyway, I came back from that deployment, very clear to me, okay, it's time. And I didn't think about it up until then, because when you're in it, you have to, especially as a leader, you have to be, the pendulum has to be 100% on the team.
Yeah.
And people, you can say, I prioritize my family or whatever else. No, not for me, and not for most of the people that I worked with.
Sure.
I say that when their family's listening, but
Right.
that pendulum is on the team, because it
Totally.
has to be.
It has to be, of course.
Are relying on you, and their
Sure.
families are relying on you to make the best decisions possible downrange. So for me,
Yeah.
if I wasn't out there training with the guys, if I was at home, I was studying the enemy. I was studying what's going on after action reports, just to whatever I could possibly do to know that I did everything in my power to be the best combat leader I could be.
Right
that was my life for a long time. But then when I came back, I went to Buds. They put me at Buds as the operations officer, which is essentially a COO of a company. You're running day-to-day operations, but you don't really run that much, because that thing's been around for a while, and it's push-ups, it's sit-ups, it's runs, and you have all these people, these instructor staff that have been there for a while, very professional. So that was not a difficult assignment.
Sure.
Point being, I had a chance to take my first breath.
Nice.
And think, okay, what am I going to do? Okay, it's time to get out. It's time to take care of my family. I have a couple of years left here in the military to hit that 20-year mark. And I think that makes sense, because I can figure out my transition. And so that's what I did. And it was helpful not to be responsible for guys' lives downrange during that transition, because it allowed me to take that breath and think about something else.
Well, you could free up a little mental bandwidth, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That bandwidth.
So how did you, yeah, exactly. How did you then jump into the beginning? I'm just interested in as an author, but I want it to kind of speak to this all in philosophy. How did you then jump into the terminal list? I mean, did you already have a basic idea in mind? Do you begin framing it up as a pitch? How'd you start that?
Yeah, so I didn't do too much reading on how to do this. I mean, I read a few things, some of the classics, but I think there's a point where you can almost study how to do something too much. So I read On Writing by, and all this was in conjunction with me starting my process, which I'll get to here in one second. But On Writing by Stephen King, The Successful Novelist by David Morrell, Stephen Pressfield's books on creativity that he has out there, Do the Work, Turning Pro, Authentic Swing, and there's a few other ones. So those ones, and I read them each once as I was starting this process, but I didn't read anything else as far as the how-to side of things. Like, I didn't know that I needed an agent. Thank goodness that I didn't.
Right. Absolutely.
I didn't. So I was a bit naive on that side of the house. I think it's because it was just so ingrained in me from an early age that first I'm going to be a SEAL. I'm going to serve my country in uniform. When it's time to get out, then I'm going to write thrillers. And of course, it's going to be the same publisher as Vince Flynn and Brad Thor. And of course, it's going to get optioned for a Hollywood movie by an A-list star. The exact one that I had in mind that I wanted. So like that. I didn't think of anything else. Like, it couldn't have worked out any other way. It was even part of my, calculus, other than, if this doesn't work out, I need some backup plans. But that's all the thought I gave to the failure people, knowing that it was, and also at the same time, I always knew that I was going to write two, because John Grisham wrote A Time to Kill first, and he could not give that book away. And arguably, I think it's his best work. Then the second book, he writes The Firm. That's One Takes Off. Tom Cruise stars in the movie, the whole deal. And we give a John Grisham novel every year since. But had he just written that first one, gotten discouraged, and not written the second one, then we would not have a John Grisham book every year.
So smart, man.
Law somewhere. So I was always going to do two, and if both of them didn't work out, then I was going to reevaluate. So that was kind of my calculus every year anyway. And it's going to be
great play.
But what I did was I sat down and I wrote down about 6, 7, 8 different ideas, 1-page executive summaries. Some were like 2 paragraphs, some were a page and a half, but let's say a 1-page executive summary on each of these ideas. And I had them on the table, and then I chose the one that I thought would be the most visceral, the most primal, the most hard-hitting, and honestly, the most likely to get noticed by a publisher
Well,
in New York.
and
So
mission accomplished, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's the way I approached it. And those other ones are now becoming the next books in the series. So those
Oh,
other ideas
nice.
that were on the
Nice.
table right there just morphed to now continue and push the story forward with this character, James Reese, who's a prior enlisted Navy SEAL sniper who then becomes an officer. And when I started writing, he was at that same stage that I was, that he
Right.
decided to get out and take care of his family. And that's
Yep.
exactly where I was when
Yep.
I started writing this process. So that's what I did. It was very clear which book that needed to be.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to do this one called Savage Son, which is the one that comes out in April. But
Nice.
I knew that the character wasn't developed enough to get there yet. I couldn't jump in with that one, even though that's the one I've read since the 6th grade when I first read The Most Dangerous Game.
That's so cool, man.
It's the third one pays tribute to that story of hunted
nice.
Versus hunter.
I love how you do that as an author, by the way. I love how you do that. All those little tributes, all those little nods. And by the way, go to your website. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm telling listeners, go to his website. Is it jackcarr.com?
Officialjackcarr.com.
Officialjackcarr.com. Because if you're like me, you're going to start seeing the gear and the updates on the Land Cruiser and just, all the cool stuff that's in the book comes to life. And it just, dude, you just make this so interesting for the reader because you truly can create a bit of a community and a way to feel so much more connected to the character. And yeah, just the evolution, right, of this series that you're creating. It's a great website. Really, really well done.
Thank you. That was something I did as well, because I was so used to being on the battlefield and looking for those emerging opportunities and then taking advantage of those emerging opportunities and adapting quicker than the enemy was. Like that's really all I did.
Nice.
So that was my foundation. And going into this space, I think I brought that with me. So I looked for, so what is this? I had no background. So I had nothing to fall back on, like, oh, this is how we did it in my last. This is what we did at my work there. This is what happened. This is how we did it at my whatever firm. So this is just what you do. I had none of that.
Yeah.
Nor did I have any experience with websites, with social media, with Facebook, with Instagram, with any of that stuff.
Of course not.
No accounts, nothing. It's only when I was in, it was nothing good could have come of it.
Understood. Yeah.
And now it's a little different. Now we can get to that too. That's a little different. But now you're the outlier if you don't have things like that. So it's an interesting thing for people in that space to deal with. But point being, I had no preconceived notion of what I should or shouldn't do. So for me, I looked at it as a blank page and, okay, where are the opportunities? Oh, here they are. And then just in the back of my head, it's like, oh, this wasn't available to an author 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever.
Totally.
So why don't I share this journey? Authors couldn't share their journey in the mid 80s. There was no way for them to do that. They could write an op-ed here or there, or a magazine article, maybe. But there wasn't a way to share their journey with people. And I thought, okay, if I'm doing all these things, why don't I share that journey with people?
So smart.
Maybe someone will be interested, or maybe someone will be able to take inspiration from it, whether it's in the writing space or not, just life in general, and say that, oh, look at this guy did it. And then I share a little bit of the adversity along the way. And they say, because everyone deals with adversity. And I think that's why the second novel, I think, really resonated with people, because it's really about adversity and about transformation, about learning to live again. And everybody goes through transformative periods of their life, whether it's a divorce or a job change or just taking a breath and realizing they want to be somebody different or do something different or whatever it may be. So I figured, why don't I share this with people, because it's something that others couldn't do 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I love that, man. And we'll put those links in the show notes, because I really want to drive people there. If you've not yet read Jack's books, first of all, you really need to. Like, these are the kind of books that I relish the idea of my time sitting down, listening to these books. Next time you and I talk, I'll be able to tell you about how I'm assimilating the audios, because I'm looking forward to that now that I know that you've got an amazing narrator, right?
Yeah. Ray Porter.
I had to read my own book. I'm so, low level pedestrian.
People ask me about that, and I say, no, I want a professional to do that.
Good call, man. Good call. So, Jack, incredibly, we're out of time, man. But I think what I take from this is the very thing that attracted me to the idea of doing this podcast with you. And that is that you have been all in two completely separate, although connected, of course, you've created the connection points logically, but completely separate endeavors. And, you know, one of the things that I think I'm most encouraged about by that is that as a coach, I think sometimes people, like you just said with the second book, do need to reinvent themselves, do need to take some shots, do figure out what that next chapter is going to look like. And you, to me, are just such a great example of being all in both of those. I can't wait to see what's coming out ahead. I mean, I really can't. And my hope is that there's going to be a moment where there's going to be some popcorn involved. That's all I'm saying. That's my hope. And I hope it works out better than Vince's first film, by the way. That was not, I don't think they played the Mitch Rapp character quite as effectively as they could there, but that's just me. Jack, what an honor, man. What a pleasure. And let me not let this go by without thanking you for your service to our country. Legitimately, I appreciate that. I know you'll tell me it was a pleasure and an honor. But I also know that, you know, the guys that didn't make it home, the Mike Mansours of the world, I know that part of what you guys anchor is your ability to live your life large to benefit their memory and to honor them. And for that, I thank you also. I just love that brotherhood, man. It's such a unique thing in our culture today. I love your brotherhood and I so respect it. And I'm just grateful for the time, man, and looking forward to book 3. Can't wait.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Take care, man.
You too.